Hi, Steph from the BMW DIY Guy. My project today is I'm going to be doing the upgrade of the brand new AvinUSA 9.1 Android screen into my BMW E83 X3. Now, this system currently has the original 4.4 Android system in it that I put in now several years ago. It's been fantastic. I love the look and the style and the functionality, but what I wanted to do was upgrade it to the brand new device and bring that additional functionality and greater compatibility out of Android. So if you're watching this video and you're coming from the OEM where you still have like the little compartment up on the top of your dash, obviously this is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to be taking the existing screen out and the new one in. As I go through the install, I'll definitely speak to that because there's a couple of little changes I had to make, but all in all it's about the same. You take out the same screws and components. There's one little change you need to make to get this to fit in. I'm really excited to get this new display in. Now before we go anywhere else, please click the subscribe and a little alarm bell next to it so you get notifications when there's new videos coming out. I have a ton of new projects that are coming. You're going to be really excited to see them. There's a couple I haven't even announced yet. I'm also happy to say I now have shirts and swag and hoodies and phone cases and all kinds of things so you can be a BMW DIY guy or gal too. Just search on eBay for BMW DIY Guy and you'll come up with all of my listings, and as soon as my shirt arrives, you'll see me wearing it. So I'm super excited to get it, let me tell you. All right, so let's go ahead and get out to the garage. Let's get started and I'll walk you through this whole process. Okay, so here we are out in the car. As you can see, as I mentioned, I've got the existing system already in. If you're coming from OEM, you're going to have this little storage compartment up here at the top. Taking that out is not that much different, so I'll be able to talk you through that process. So the first thing you're going to want to do is just grab the centerpiece, get your fingers into it, and then just gently pull out of your dash. Always be gentle when you're pulling these out. There's these little foam collars that go into your vents, and if you start tearing up that foam, then your vents can not sit straight, they won't stay secure, and they can even rattle. So now you can take this, you can pull it off to one side, or you can also pull off. This is the vent controls right here. You can pull that off, and then you've got a switch in here as well, and you can potentially back out the switch itself. So sometimes these can be really, really stiff, and I mean spectacularly stiff. I've had to use tools on these sometimes to get these plugs out. And as you go through it, just be careful, because the last thing you want to do is break a plug and have it be a problem on something, you know, that shouldn't be. Plus, replacing plugs kind of sucks. So, okay, you've got two screws right here at the top, and these are your typical Phillips style screws. So we're going to take and undo those first. Be really careful not to drop any screws as you go through this. They will drop down and pretty much disappear forever. I'm going to put them in my center console for right now. I've dropped a few screws over time and they drop down into your dash, and you think they would be easy to find. Sometimes they are, sometimes they literally disappear forever. So now this top part of the frame is loose, see? So, and I'm actually going to unplug my trim here. My plug is a little tight, so I'm going to see if I can get this out and get it out of the way, because right now it's really in the way. Now the other thing you can always do is you can take and you can push the button forward, as I just did. Pull the plug. Now the button itself is loose, and you can slide this back in later. Makes it a lot easier to work with. Okay, so now that's out of the way. I've got my trim here that I'm going to run my fingers down either side. Try not to pry really hard on the top because it will flex and break right here in the middle. Don't do that, okay? So now I'm going to pull that and slide that out of the way, because what you need to get to are these two screws right here and here for the head unit. And again, these are just standard Phillips screws. Going to take both of these out. All similar process with the OEM. Obviously, I'm going to have to talk to taking this existing system out a little bit, but it's all in all about the same. And we're going to talk about how these plugs work as well on the back of your head unit. So now your head unit will slide out. Now when you look at the back of your head unit right here, now this is what your plug will look like. This is obviously the wiring harness, which is a different setup, but you've got this little horseshoe collar or horse collar style plug. So generally you pull up and kind of out, and then the plug will come out. You might also want to take your antenna off for now so you can take your head unit and set it aside. You have the most amount of room to work with. And now the other thing you're going to want to do, and they're really hard to show, so I'm not going to adjust my camera to do so just for two screws, but there's a screw here and a screw here. Now I'm going to take both of these out. These are also the screws that you would take out if you were taking out your center console tray. You know, this little pop door tray that you've got up here. These are the screws that I want to drop the most, so be careful when you do that. So I'm going to take both of these out. And then, as you can see, I mean, this has only been just a minute or two, and we already have the dash apart. So there's a couple of things we're going to want to look at when we get to the wiring harness. Now, this is mostly loose at this point, so I can begin to back this out, as you can see. And again, the differences between the OEM and this display already in. So I'm going to leave that there just for a moment. Okay, so let's talk about your wiring harnesses. Now, I've got a bit of a wiring mess in here right now, just because of coming from the existing harness. So let me take that off, because we need to take all of this out anyway, and I'm going to show you what we're looking at. Okay, so what we've got on all of this setup, right, is you need to have your auxiliary wire plugged in, and this is what your plug is going to look like coming off the back of the head unit. And then you also have this aux connection as well, which I've got hooked up right now. So I'm going to wait and hold to show you what this looks like once we get it all out, okay? So let me do that. Let me come back to this in just a moment. I'm going to take this and I'm going to unplug all of my existing, and it's just a matter of just working all these wires out and taking all of that just like that. It's super simple. And we'll get the GPS antenna, which I'm probably going to need. I'm going to need my plastic trim tool to get the little locking tab, and then it'll come out. And then this original display will be out. So I'm going to get this out, and then I'm going to walk you through getting the new one in. I'm going to adjust my camera angle a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. All right, so let's talk about getting the new one plugged in. So you've got a couple of different options. Because of the amount of space here, it's a little hard to get the right camera angle to show it all. So I'm going to do my best. I've tipped the camera down a little bit so you can see all this frame a little bit easier. So I've got my center controls kind of pulled out of the way. Here's the original plug off the back of the head unit. And this is where you need to do something really important. If you do not have the aux cable, so you have to have the aux add-on cable if you don't have it already. Now, as you can see, I've already got it because I've got a male-to-male aux plugged in because I had the previous display. We've got a little bit of electrical tape here to make sure the plug doesn't come loose. But this is the OEM cable, which is really expensive for just a cable. I believe AvinUSA still sells one just like it. And you're going to need to plug it in to your original plug. So it's going to come around, comes all the way in, and plugs into your original plug on this side, because there's a pass-through in the wiring, in the new wiring harness. But if you don't have this, because the X3 is not like, this E83 X3 is not like, you know, the F series or later models that have an integrated aux port or can take the aux feed directly through the wiring harness. This head unit requires the aux cord. It was an add-on, it was an addition, right? So I get lots of comments all the time on my videos that I'm like, okay, well now I don't have any sound from the Android side. And I'm like, well, do you have the aux cable or aux port? And they're like, the what? So you have to have that. You have to have it plugged in. You may have a plug here already, which I did. As you can see right here, this is the original that was plugged into that slot. So when I got the aux cable, and this only has a couple of wires on it, I backed this out and I put the new one and plugged the new one into that spot, in that same spot. Okay, so the one other thing that I wanted to show that's difficult to show because I've already done it. Again, unlike the F series, the USB cables, or the two USB ports that I want to use, I routed in my F series through my glove box. You can't do that in an E83, E83 X3. That room is not there. So I've actually routed them down to the ashtray. I pulled the little bin out of the ashtray. I drilled a small hole on one side and I fed the cable down and through and up behind all of this, up in, and this is where the end of the cable is right now. Now I'm going to reuse the same USB cables I had before. I checked the pin out. The pin out is exactly the same, so I'm not going to swap that out. But you can do the same. You can route these cables anywhere you want. You could have it out this, route it down and have it come out the side of your trim, or side of the center console or wherever you wanted it. I liked having it in the ashtray because then I can close the little door in the ashtray and I don't see it. It's a very clean install. Okay, so pretty straightforward. It looks a little spaghetti mess right now, but it's really not. It's really not that bad. So the one thing that you really want to make sure to do is good cable management. So let's take, you're going to want to take your new wiring harness, and this guy is going to run all the way. You're going to run it through, I usually run it through where your head unit goes because everything is going to be tucked back and down for all of this cable mass. Because keep in mind, this cabling is not, the space behind her was not designed for all of this. So you really have to be good at your cable management. Before I tuck this in here, I want to talk about one more thing. I do not have a backup camera in this car. I'm planning on it. I've put a backup camera in my E83 X3, and it makes a world of difference. The E83 X3 is kind of blind out the back as well. I just haven't done a backup camera and haven't gotten around to it. If you do, or if you have an aftermarket camera, this is where you plug it in, and this is where you can get power, 12-volt power for your camera. You get the trigger wire, which in this case is called camera DET or detect, and then you've got your RCA style plug for the video in that's going to go. I don't have it in this case, so I'm not going to show how to hook that up, right? But it's right there if you need it. So I'm going to take it, just route it through the center where your head unit came out of, route it down, route it around the vents, and route it up into this upper section and just work it in. Try not to beat the plug or cables up. It can be pretty tight as you get it all up in here. Okay, just like that. So cable management, let's talk about a couple of more things. So if you're coming from OEM and you took this storage bin out, you have a post right here. There's a little plastic post that stands up. I'll be honest, I don't know why it's there. I have no clue of why that plastic post is there other than some sort of support for the bin. When I originally installed this display, I was wondering if I could put the bin back in. So even with this post cut off, because I cut the post off, put the bin back in, and the bin was just as strong as it had ever been. So it's kind of unnecessary. What you're gonna have to do though is you're gonna have to cut this post. So if you're coming from an OEM, you're gonna have to cut this little post off right here. You can take a good serrated knife, or you can take a hacksaw blade and just work it across and cut that off flush. I wanted to make sure to mention it and not forget about it since I removed it now a couple of years ago. Let's talk about the other cables. So we've talked about the USB cable that goes in. We've talked about the male-to-male aux cable that's going to be all routed back behind, and I'll touch on that again in a second. And you've got one more cable bundle that can plug into the back of the display for a RCA style DVR in, for audio RCA, and RCA is like that yellow plug, right? This is an RCA style plug right here. So you've got RCA style plugins for sound left, right, DVR in, and I think a TV in as well. I don't have any of those options in this car, so I'm not going to plug it in. If you did, you'd plug it in the back of the display. Okay, so let's look at the display. They've definitely made some improvements, which makes me really, really happy with this. The one thing I noticed in the 4.4 generation is this back plane right here was pretty thin plastic. And so if it was ever, you had to get these little locking feet in just absolutely perfect. And so if they were off or sitting off a little bit, this plastic was thin enough it would want to buckle and twist, and you could see it from the side where you get a little bit of gap where it would gap up and generally be kind of a pain and not look all that great. So I found I fiddled with that a fair amount. The one other thing I want to point out while I'm here is your SD card expansion for this is right here underneath this little door. If you're going to put an SD card in your display, put it in now. Pull the cover, click the SD card in, put your cover back on. It is not easy to get to once this is in place. So it's really one of those things that it's, maybe you've got music or video files or something that you want to have on here, or just have expandable memory, put it in now. All right, so all pretty straightforward. We're to the point of plugging it in. So this is where you would plug everything in. So let's talk about the GPS antenna for a second. The GPS antenna is right here. Now, what I found in this case where like my F32, I'd run the antenna off to the inside or inside off to the different sides, I found that I actually don't even untie this cable bundle at all. I just plug it straight into the display, and I just lay the antenna right here directly under the display, and I leave it right there. And it's perfectly fine. I've never had a reception problem, and it works great. So you plug in your GPS here. You plug in your 3 cables. If you're using all 3, they only go into one spot. So the big one, which is your primary bus cable, your USB, which is the small one, and then that harness that's got all the RCA style plugs on it is the medium one. You plug it all in. And I'm going to do this without plugging in so you can see it a little bit better. Now, like I said, there's little feet, and they've improved how these feet fit as well. So there's little feet that slide into place, slide in and down. And I'm gonna have to arrange just a little bit to get this all in the right fitment to get this in. But just work at it, work to get those feet set into place, because they slide underneath, there it is, just like that. And that already, and granted, you can't see the back, I know, and I'll show it here in a little bit, that's already 10 times better than what it was. There's no extra pressure, those feet are longer and scoop down in better, and it's set really, really well. So as soon as I put these 2 screws in, it's gonna fit perfectly. So that's great. One last thing that I wanna show, and let me grab my previous display so I can show you. Excuse me a second. Now, if you've got the bin, you'll pull these off the bin, or if you've got the previous display, you'll do that. So if you notice right here, and I'll be honest with you, I can never remember what these little locking screw plates are called. There's some official word for them, but I've got little locking screw plates right here that are not on the new one, or if you're taking these off the bin. So you just pull and take these off and pull them off and put them right back on the matching feet on the new display. And this is what those 2 screws screw into to secure your display down. So a lot of talking, a lot of showing how it's done, but it really is that simple. It's really not that hard. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to pull these 2 plates off. I'm going to plug my cables in and my GPS antenna into the display. I'm going to set it down into place, and I'm going to screw it into place because we won't need to move it after that point. And then I'm going to show you about tucking all of your cabling harness back in, setting your head unit back in, and you're really almost done at that point. And then it's just clean up and put it back together. This is super simple. I don't know why you would pay for a shop to have this done. If you're here in the Pacific Northwest and you need somebody to help you, I certainly can. I do commission work all the time and do installs all the time. If you need a hand, definitely let me know. But my goal in this is to help you do the work yourself. Okay, so I'm going to get my new display plugged in, I'll set into place, and I'll show you putting it all back together and good cable management, and you will be done. The display's in and all plugged in. Like I said, I plugged in the USB, the GPS, and the main bus plug. 2 things there. Make sure the GPS antenna is in and pushed in really, really firmly. Make sure that it locks into place, and then also make sure that that main bus plug is pushed in really firmly. I found that it's such a tight fit that if you don't push it in firmly, you might get it only in halfway or sit a little cockeyed. So make sure that that's set. And the cable, like I said, is routed here and up and underneath, and then we'll route beside the vents right here. You remember when you put your center vent controls back in, you don't want anything in front of the vents that are gonna cause problems. So cable management matters. So tuck all your cables back so they're out of the way, and your vents will go in just fine. So then you've got this adapter here, both male and female. Take the female end. You've got your aux cable that I mentioned before plugged in right here. It's plugged into your main original OEM plug. So walk back that locking collar. It only goes in one way. Just slide that into place, lock the locking collar down. So now you've got, as I got a little bit of cable tangle, sorry. Now you've got the other end here. This is going to go into the back of your head unit, so make sure that goes in really firmly and securely. And then don't forget your antenna as well off your main wiring harness from your original OEM plug. Plug that into the back of your head unit, or you're going to wonder why you don't have a radio. The other thing you want to do is take your aux cable adapter that you added, which is super long because they intended it to route who knows where. Then I've got plugged in a little bit of extra tape there to make sure that it doesn't come undone. I had that happen once. Here's the other end. And look at your new wiring harness. off your new wiring harness, you will have an aux port right there. So that says audio out. This is going to be the audio out from your Android side, whether you're using Bluetooth or video files or music files, whatever. Make sure to plug that in. I'm going to run a little bit of electrical tape around that to make sure that when I tuck all this back, because you're going to really have to push and tuck all these cables back in. I've pushed them back in and the pressure has caused this to unplug. So I'm going to get a little bit of an extra electrical tape, wrap that around there. So then you just tuck all this back into place. Don't forget your antenna, your original antenna, because it's easy to get tucked back as well. So tuck all of this back in and down, and keep going down, 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 down with it as much as possible, because you have to get it out of the way of the head unit that's going to be coming in to this same spot, right? So here's your cable that's going to plug into the back of the head unit, and you just keep tucking and tucking. Now I'm going to wait for a second, because like I said, I want to get some electrical tape, but you can see what I'm doing. And then I'll take the head unit, plug the head unit back in, which you got to turn it the correct orientation like that. The other thing I often do is I'll cover my dash with a towel, with some of my, my lower dash, to make sure I don't bash it up. Last thing I want to do is scratch up my interior when I do this work. So you just slide that into place. It can be a little snug sometimes. There we go. And then lock that locking collar back down into place. It should get a nice clean lock. Grab your antenna, plug that back in. It only goes one way because the way the plug is keyed. And then, as you can see, our head unit's running again. So before I tuck the rest of this back in, like I said, I'm going to get some electrical tape. I've got a little bit of extra cabling I've got to tuck back. But then I'll show you just the last little bits of the head unit in, trim back on, we'll turn it on and test. So the head unit's pushed back into place. An advantage that the E53 and E83 have over the F32, let me tell you, is you've got a little more space to deal with. Plus you've got this open void right here when you have your environmental controls pulled out. So you can actually stick your hand back in here and help pull all this cabling down and out of the way, because the head unit is going to slide all the way back, and there's a post on the back of it that fits into a frame in the back to keep it from moving around. So it's got to be able to go all the way back and flush, which it is now. So it's really a matter of kind of pushing it back into place, pulling the cables down, pushing it back, cables down until it's back and flush, and then you're good to go. The other thing you want to make sure, don't lose this cable. This is the cable again that goes into your button inner center console, so make sure that you didn't suck that down and get it lost in the process. Make sure that it's still up and out and your vent control cable is still up and out. And then with all the rest of your cables here, you can see your vent openings on either side right here. Just make sure you can take your cables, move them around a little bit, give yourself a little bit of room, and then get them tucked in and back and away so they don't foul your vents when you put your vents back in, because they're gonna want to, right? So make sure that they're not, because by default they're going to want to sit in front of it, and that'll be good to go. So now my head unit is back into place just like that. So again, I'm going to take my screwdriver and put my 2 screws back in. Don't force all of this. There is absolutely enough room for this all to fit. So if you feel like you're just having to smash it back into place, well, something's in the way, right? You have enough room to pull this down. You do have a little spare room, especially with this business CD. If you have the OEM navigation, which is pretty rare in this age, you have big full-size controls, and it's bigger, and it's meant for to take up all of that space. In this case, you've got a little extra, so you're able to get that extra cabling in and have it work just fine. Okay, so the head unit's in. My display is in and secured here with the 2 screws underneath. Like I said, that are just super simple. Hopefully you transferred the locking plates like I just did, and my display is in, and I'm already, if nothing else, I'm already really pleased with this redesign of this mounting plate around the back. It sits flush now, it looks perfect. Like I said, you just take the little hooks on the back, there's 2 gaps, and just drop it into that, and it rocks right into place, which hopefully you saw a little bit earlier. So that's good to go. So let me just make sure the rest of my cabling is tucked back, because you don't want it to interfere with your atmospheric controls when you put those back in. So you take this and just slide it. I've got a little bit of cable. Again, my cable length is interesting because of everything jammed in there, but you just take that, slide it into place. The bottom part snaps in. There's the 2 screws on top, which I will put back in. just like this. There's 1 and 2. Don't drop them, as I almost just did. Somewhere down deep in my dash in this car, there is one of these screws. Thankfully, I had a spare, but I've dropped one a while ago. Just never found it. Don't know where it went. Dropped in the console black hole. Okay, so that's all set. So I've got my cabling for my controls. I've got my cabling the cable for the vent. So what you're going to do is, you can see I've pushed the button partially out. So now this button you can take and slide all the way out, which actually makes it a little bit easier to deal with. Okay, so take your green cable control. The green part goes back on this little knob, on this little ratchet. The red part clips in. There's a little clip that you just push it into. Might be a little hard to see at this angle. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, or if it isn't hard to see. So I just got to get that snapped back into place. There it is. Nice little click. I'll dial it so I can get the green control back on. And then you can take the cable and just feed the cable through the hole. That's really the easiest way to do it, to get it back on that switch. Now, take your vent controls, make sure that you don't have any cables in the way of the vent openings themselves. And you can see it's fighting me a little bit, which I bet I've got a cable in the way. I do a little bit. Okay, so just take it, rock it back into place just like that. So it's back in and snug. Make sure that it's snug. Here's our cable. And this plug only goes in one way. So it plugs back into place. And then just slowly feed your cable back in. There you go. And snap your button in. You can tell your button works, which is good. And we're all set to go there. Okay, so everything's back together. You can see this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to adjust my camera and zoom in a little bit. I am not going to do a full walkthrough of the display on this video. This is the installation video. I'll plan a full walkthrough video to go with this as complimentary and to follow up after this. But let me change my camera angle so I can zoom in. You can see the screen. We're going to fire the car up for the first time. I want to show you a couple of settings. And then we're all done. So put your tools away. Your car's put together and you've got this new display in. All right, so zoomed in on the screen. Let's bring accessories up. Sorry, you get to hear my car beeping. There's going to be a couple of things you're going to want to check as you go through this, as your display starts up, and make sure that everything works. I just realized with my camera angle you can't see the business CD head unit, but what's going to be key on that and will show that your aux feed is working is that, and again, if you've never had it, you now have a new mode on your stereo display. You have so you've got the button to the right that's labeled SC and mode. That mode before used to be radio and radio and CD. And now you'll have a third one that says AUX or aux. That will recognize exactly what's going on. So now let's flip back here really quickly. Let's go back. Okay, so here's your display, and this is going to mimic the new iDrive 7. You actually have some options on what you would like to do to change through those options. You can actually change the skin. You can go back to iDrive 5, iDrive 6, iDrive 7. I'll show you those briefly on what you're looking at. So, okay, but in the interim, here, so the display's up and working, which is great. My CD player, which I'm sorry, but I wanted you to be able to see the screen better. If I hit mode, it's radio, CD, aux. Aux will be the iDrive, or excuse me, will be the display side. So let's go to, for example, let's go to Bluetooth. So we've got phone, Bluetooth settings, Bluetooth music, okay? And it's connected to my phone right at the moment. So now, the one thing I am gonna do is I'm going to be careful in playing music on these. Whenever I have any sort of music on my videos, YouTube scans your videos and I get a takedown because it's someone else's intellectual property, right? So I'm gonna be really careful playing music because I always get it taken down, and that's always a huge drag, right? So, but you can definitely see it's connected, which is great. Okay. So let me stop that because I don't want to take down. So it's working. I've got sound because that was Bluetooth. That was a little Linkin Park through my phone, through the Bluetooth, through the aux cable with my stereo set to aux. Okay. So now a couple of things here that I want to show you. Now, the one thing that is different in this car, say for example over the F32, this does not have a native iDrive. So what you've got, as I double click here, so your car info, so there's a couple of things I want to point out here really quickly. So car info on the F series or a car that's got the native iDrive, that would take you back to the iDrive side. Obviously in a car that does not natively have that, then you don't have that option, and so it would be a blank screen or something similar. So if you do that now, it'll take you to the clock. Okay, so the one other thing that I wanted to show in all of this is I wanted to go into settings. You can select what map navigation, because your navigation you can choose on what you want to have. I go Google Maps, you can install Waze, you can install anything like that. You select them by double clicking on them. Do you want to change the navigation settings? Yes. Okay. You can also get into your audio controls with all your different volumes, your time, which I'm going to set it to auto sync off GPS. That time for me is wrong right at the moment because it's not synced off my GPS yet. I'm sitting in my garage and I have really bad GPS signal in here no matter what device I'm using inside my garage. So it hasn't synced it yet, which is no big deal. And then the other thing I wanted to get into is factory setup. I wanted to share this really quickly. So the factory code 1314 and then OK will get you into your factory settings. So this is a place that's really important in the F series. It's not as important here because we don't have the iDrive side, but you can make a number of choices in here on what you would like to have, what you'd like to be running. This old BMW X1 car video display, this is the option that enables that clock. If you don't have the clock, that option will be unchecked, I'm willing to bet you. Car type normally, which is a huge big deal for the iDrive folks like in my F32, not important here at all. You can change your boot logo. You've got a couple of different options over here. You can have the BMW connected drive. You can use the BMW logo. You can go into your advanced settings. And this is the other thing I wanted to share. So if you go into your advanced settings, this is the skin that you have over the top. So Evo ID7, which is the new iDrive 7 style skin. You can go back to the 6, you can go back to the 5. I mean, you've got a lot of different options there. You even have different manufacturer options there, though I don't run them myself. So I run the iDrive 7 now in my F32, and I'll do the same here. Okay, so that is really the basics of what we're looking at for getting this installed. Everything is working. The one thing I want to go back to really quick, and that was radio. Again, only a few brief seconds. That was the radio. I wanted to make sure that it was still working. If I go to my CD, which is working as well. So everything is working. You want to source everything. Make sure that all your sources are working. Your Bluetooth, your music files coming from the Android side are working. Make sure that your radio is still working, your CD is working. And other than that, you're good to go. So then at that point, you just clean up and you're done. The display comes with a little film over the top of it. I usually take it off. You could always keep it on if you wanted to. I normally take it off because it's got some bubbles in it normally and looks a little wonky. So I take it off. All in all, I'm super happy. This is going to give me Android 9 functionality. This is going to give me greater app compatibility, and even the locking plate is better, or this back plate is better, which makes me so happy because, you know, the previous one, if it got warm, the plastic was a little soft, a little thin. If it got warm, it might buckle a little bit or twist a little bit, and then I'd be fiddling with it because there'd be a gap. And I'm kind of a perfectionist that way. That's not going to be a problem anymore. So I'm really happy about that. All right, so clean up your tools. You're all done. All right, so all done. So as you can see, it's really not a hard process, and you only need a couple of simple tools to get this all done. Everything will be in the description on the video below, so if you need any tools or parts that you don't have, things like a plastic trim tool set, which is really, really convenient, And I would recommend having one because it's one of those primary tools I go back to time and time again. Helps me keep from damaging my interior and other pieces as you work. You know, metal on plastic is generally bad. Metal will tear up plastic. So it's a good thing to have. Thank you to USA for the partnership on this project. I'm really glad to have this update in my car. If you have any questions, please leave comments down below. I try to respond to as many as I can, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video.